Turning back to U.S. politics now, presidential candidates are looking ahead to Tuesday's big primary in Michigan after Saturday's contests. On the Republican side, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump each won 2 states on Saturday. This just days after former Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney delivered a scathing speech against Trump, calling him a phony and a fraud. CNN chief political analyst Gloria Borger talked with Romney about what drove him to speak out and who he would vote for in November.
I can't imagine supporting Donald Trump for president or Hillary Clinton for president, either one. I'll hopefully be able to find a conservative on the ballot who I can vote for.
Did party leaders, looking back, and I guess yourself included, misread their own voters in the Republican base by betting on the fact that perhaps Donald Trump would simply implode of his own free will?
Oh, I don't know about other people. I certainly paid attention to Donald Trump. I didn't expect him to do so well.
Right.
But he has tapped into an anger which is very much understood. What he's done with that anger, however, is not to build it into resolve and high purpose, but instead to take it down a very dark alley. And that, I think, is unfortunate. But I don't think you can write off any candidate. I thought Jeb Bush would do better than he did. I like Jeb a lot. Thought he would be able to gain a lot of momentum, but that didn't happen. Donald Trump has, and at this stage we say, all right, he could easily become the nominee, probably most likely to be the Republican nominee at this point. But I think there's a better choice out there.
Who is it?
Well, Marco Rubio is the right person in Florida. John Kasich's the right person in Ohio. And Ted Cruz is right anywhere where he's leading right now or where he's closest to Donald Trump.
When are you going to choose one?
Well, it depends in part on how the process continues. I expect that after March 15th, it may be clearer who is going to be the, if you will, the person who opposes Donald Trump most effectively. And so I would anticipate endorsing at that time. But let's say all three are doing about the same.
Right, then what?
Well, then I'd probably, again, encourage who's ever doing best in a particular state to get the support there and do that state by state. And that would lead to an open convention where you'd see the delegates elected make the final decision.
For a closer look now, I want to bring in Mark Preston, executive editor of CNN Politics. He joins us from Flint, Michigan. Great to have you with us, Mark, as always. Now, despite Mitt Romney saying he was glad he didn't run when he saw the debate stage the other night because he said it was so degrading and so demeaning, he continues to give his opinion from the sidelines. Does his opinion carry much weight?
In some ways it does. Listen, at this point, Lynda, there has not been a unifying voice here in the United States for the Republican Party, certainly one that opposes Donald Trump. So then you go to the second part of that. Does he really have a whole lot of influence? And because there are so many people that are still frustrated with how Mitt Romney ran his campaign against Barack Obama, many thought it was lackluster, it was full of errors, that they don't think that necessarily he is the voice to carry it. But what he did tell Gloria, and he has been saying over and over again, is something very interesting. He is willing to back anybody that can take on Donald Trump, but in order to get to that point, he wants to deny Trump the ability to become the Republican nominee. And how do you do that? You do that by keeping the 3 remaining candidates against Trump in the race to deny him delegates. It's an interesting game of mathematics, but it's something that Romney and other establishment Republicans are trying to do now, Lynda.
Now, in the votes we've seen so far, Republicans have had a record turnout. Kansas, for example, had more than double the number of voters compared to 2012. Should the Democrats be concerned about an enthusiasm gap?
They should, absolutely. No question about that, as should the Republican establishment. And let me just say that on 2 fronts. If you're a Democrat right now, you need to have your party energized. It is still fractured because you have Bernie Sanders, the Vermont senator, who is running a very strong campaign against Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State. At some point, though, you have to assume that Hillary Clinton is going to eventually become the nominee, and she is going to need all of the Sanders supporters to come her way. Perhaps we will then see the enthusiasm gap rise behind one candidate, but that remains to be seen. We have seen Donald Trump, though, on the Republican side, really energize voters, specifically voters who have not participated in past elections. So the Republican establishment has to be worried about that because it might be those voters who actually give Donald Trump the Republican nomination in July in Cleveland, Ohio.
Now, despite the fact that Donald Trump is well in front, he does need 1,200 delegates, over 1,200 delegates, to secure the nomination for the Republican Party. Failing that, it could go through to the Republican National Convention in July. Just stay with us a moment while I take us through some of the history. A contested convention is an extreme rarity in the US presidential race. The last time it nearly happened, was 1976. Then President Gerald Ford did not have the majority of delegates needed before the Republican convention, but he narrowly defeated Ronald Reagan, winning enough votes on the first ballot to secure his party's nomination. Mark, what do you think is the likelihood that the Republican Party will make a decision that could deny Trump the chance to run as their nominee?
It's certainly something that's on the table right now. Two ways that they could potentially do that. Well, actually, one way they could potentially do that, and two ways to potentially deny him the presidency. The first way is to keep these additional candidates in the race. He needs, as you said, 1,237 delegates. For our international viewers, that's basically votes. He needs 1,237 votes. The way that it is set up and the process is set up is that if all these candidates stay in and they keep on winning a couple votes here, a couple votes there, Trump could be denied that number. And if that's the case, that's when you go into a contested convention, and that's where you have the first ballot, second ballot scenarios. In addition to that, they're also thinking of running a conservative candidate against Donald Trump, a third-party candidate. By doing that, though, they could potentially be handing the presidency to the Democratic nominee, because you'd be siphoning votes, you'd be splitting the Republican Party. No option is very good right now for the Republican Party, as it's fractured and splintered and shattered over this ascendancy of Donald Trump, but they're trying to figure things out. Certainly those anti-Trump forces, they just don't have a great answer at this hour.
Mark Preston in Flint, Michigan, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.